type of spinach pasta that's made totally out of spinach and tasted awful.
Did it
That was
really?
it. Yeah.
Is it bad? I've never tried that stuff. I've seen it, but
This particular one was bad, and I don't think I'd buy the same brand or recommend it, actually.
What was the name of the brand?
I have no idea. It was a Whole
really?
Foods deal, so
Yeah, okay. Well, I apologize for that, but I applaud you for eating vegetarian, it sounds like.
Yes, well, it was a sign last night when a bear attacked my gas grill.
You're kidding.
No, he kind of tore it apart a little bit, but it all went back together, yeah. We have a resident bear.
He's like, how dare you try to cook up my fellow animal brothers and sisters.
That's what it is, yeah.
Wow, well, I applaud the bear as well then.
All right.
Way to stand up for your people.
For sure. Yeah.
It's his version of sitting down or kneeling during the national anthem.
Right.
Is attacking your because it's a kind of a national sign, doing barbecues. It's an American thing, and he's like, America needs to respect our critters because they are important citizens as well.
Yeah. Well, we actually feed the animals up here. There's lots of them. There's lots of fox. Do you say foxes? Lots of foxes.
Foxy ladies.
Oh yeah, not here.
No, okay.
We're kind of remote here on top of the mountain. Squirrels. I've been attacked by many squirrels. Birds. The place is just packed full of animals all the time. Raccoons and stuff, and they all are pretty round. They get fed very well.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us for Animal Hour, Animal Talk here on. No, actually, UFOs. You're supposed to be talking about UFO news, Martin.
Geez.
But here, let me kind of prime the pump here. My guests for today are, I should call them Tony and Ben, the Zamora brothers. I told you that earlier, and I like that title.
Yeah.
It is because Tony Angiola and Ben Moss, they work with MUFON Virginia, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit here. They have been doing a lot of work with Ray Stanford and to talk about the Zamora case. Ray has done the most research when it comes to the Lonnie Zamora case, as you'll hear from these gentlemen coming up here. And Tony and Ben have worked with him, and they're now working on getting this information out. They spoke about this topic at the MUFON Symposium. And they've got just so much, and, it's an important case. I know some of the surface stuff, and people kind of ask me about it quite a bit, but, these guys know so much. Oh, my gosh, just tons more. There's so much more to the case than even I ever imagined. I still don't even know a fraction of everything to do with the case. It seems like we touch on a lot, but we'll have them back to touch on more. And I need to do like you did and get out to Ray's house to actually see some of this stuff.
Oh, it's well worth it. And there's just so much information Ray has. He's pretty amazing. And I really like Tony and Ben. They actually joined me there. And they're just a lot of fun, both of those guys. But they really are diving deeply into that topic and the subjects. As a matter of fact, when I was out in Arizona last year at the conference, they stopped in Socorro itself to see if they could find any paper work, microfiche film in the newspapers and stuff. They're just trying to get more and more information at this point. But Ray sure had it down pat. Had a lot of I'm trying to remember the name. It was something about the Pentagon Pantry Socorro saucer or something like that. A great book by Ray Stanford. I know I got it all backwards, but it's a good book.
Yep, they can look up his name, and we'll be talking about that more in just a minute. So a lot of fun. So it's great, and we'll be talking about that soon. But before we do that, we'll get into some UFO news. And you just came back from a virtual press conference.
Well, yes. This doesn't really have anything to do with UFOs, but there has been a lot of speculation ever since NASA announced last week that they were doing a live teleconference today, Monday. And so I listened in, and of course, the UK tabloids were speculating, and other news agencies were speculating that it was going to be about life on Europa, because, NASA's done this a number of times before. They make it seem like it's going to be a major announcement, and people start to speculate that it's life that they're finding. And the first person that spoke, Paul. What is his name? Paul Hertz. He's the director of the astrophysics division at NASA. And he spoke first, and he said right off the bat, nothing to do with life. So that was like, I was pretty excited, because I was kind of going along with all what the media was saying, that this could be some type of sign of life. What it is the Hubble observation of Europa has just more solid evidence that there is actually plumes of water that may consist of saline. So, like, for instance, it could be like plumes of water going out into the atmosphere. And the breaking news of this is, if they ever do get a probe to land on Europa, then it may not have to drill through all the ice, and there may be access right through these plumes. And so they looked at this through the Space Telescope Imaging Spectrograph, which is the acronym is STIS, I think it is, something like that. But anyway, so they made it. They were pretty. They made it sound exciting, but to the layperson such as myself, it wasn't all that exciting.
Yeah, because I guess people speculated that these guys existed, but they didn't find proof. They thought, oh, they definitely do, and then they thought, oh, maybe not. And then they thought that, if there were these geysers, we could prove there's water, and we'll be able to examine them, and also possibly, get closer to finding life. So everybody was so excited, and they were going all the way, oh, maybe they found some sort of evidence for life. But I guess they barely found evidence for the geysers. I mean, their existence still in question. They just a stronger possibility that there are geysers.
That's all this is. And by the way, this is back in 2014. So they really take their time when they come out with something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so William Sparks was the gentleman that stressed that this new find does not prove the existence of plumes. It just provides evidence that they may be present. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like wasn't really that exciting.
Yeah.
And, I've said this before in my show that we always think about planets that may harbor life throughout the universe, but also not just planets, but also moons could as well. I mean, there's no reason why a moon can't harbor some type of life.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to show, I guess, and unfortunately, you probably, you would agree that if the tabloids, the UK tabloids, are touting some big news or making some lofty claims, that most likely it's just not the case.
Yeah, that's true.
Bad info. But yeah, still, the hope is there and the excitement is there, and it shows just how exciting and mainstream the search for life in space has become, because people are so excited about the possibility of these they're under ice sheets, these vast oceans, to have some sort of, what if they have space whales or something?
That's right.
It's amazing. Or like jellyfish type things, or who knows.
They very well could. Yep.
Did you see the movie Europa Report, by the way?
I think I did.
Great movie.
Yeah, I believe I did. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Kind of about this topic.
Yeah, right. I think one thing they did stress also is that there's activity everywhere on Europa. That's kind of like another thing that they came up with, which would mean that the ocean is throughout overall the entire planet.
Wow.
Under the ice, that is. Yeah.
Under the sea. Wow, that is pretty cool. That's very exciting. So I'm still excited about it. It was a non-story, but I'm gonna take the happy route, the Pollyanna kind of attitude, and say I'm still excited.
Yeah. Just one more thing.
Okay.
They were asked. They had some call-ins afterwards, and it was different people called in from the press and stuff like that. And one of them asked about the Hubble, and when the James Webb satellite is launched in 2018, if that's going to be better. And is supposedly that they should actually be able to see a lot. I'm pretty excited when that thing gets launched, because they'll really be able to see a lot more things everywhere.
Cool.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, thank you for that. Some interesting stuff. Now, I have a little bit of an update from a news story that we talked about on your show.
Oh, okay.
So, if you remember, I was talking about a UFO video over Florida, over New York, between the towns of Florida and Goshen. Some guy replied.
Except you called it Gauche or something.
Well, that's how it was spelt in the story. It was a misspelling. So we were saying Gauche or Gosh, and some guy's like, neither, guys. It's Goshen. So sorry about that. It's Goshen. But there's even more updates. So it's this weird cylindrical light. It's being seen at about between 9 and 10 p.m. Just this weird light being recorded on September 16th. And now the witness says it's just a solid light. There's no blinking. But you can see in the video a little blinking light on the bottom. Well, commenters who have gone at it, and there's videos out there of blimps that do have, are illuminated from the inside and have a light. They have a light under their carriage that looks very similar. However, in this video, there's like a notch down there above the blinking light, this big notch. Well, someone else posted a picture of these balloons that have these big electronic signs on the side of them. And, people might have seen those. Well, when those signs are off, they're just a solid black. And there's plenty of pictures of these balloons, even in New York, with the lights off, and it's just a black rectangle just above the carriage. So that really fits this story. I think that, these guys have figured it out. Seems that's what we got here.
Wow. This is just as exciting as the plumes on Europa.
Just as much of a downer.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
yeah. But it's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's always good when they're figured out. I was wondering if it was a drone myself.
Mm-hmm. Now, it looks like it's in the comments of the story, you'll see some people commented, but I also posted links, some of the most convincing links that people sent us on social media, so you can see what I'm talking about. And, given those links and the photos and videos in those links, I think it's, it seems pretty solid that that's what it is. So, but people can take a look and see what they think. Then another sighting. Now, this one, I guess they're having problems, some little inside info. I guess they're having a little bit of problems getting a hold of the witness. But this is a guy in Colorado, and on September 19th, he says that he saw a ball of light being chased by 3 black helicopters. Yeah. He said that he was standing in his driveway when he saw it, this white orb going over the rooftops and over the trees. He said it, and then not far behind it were 3 black helicopters in a triangular pattern. He said the craft made a left turn towards the mountains, and he saw one of the craft then kind of intercept it and get in front of one of the helicopters, get in front of the orb, but then, the rooftops got in the way and he couldn't see anymore.
Oh, well, at that angle, it must be awful hard to tell for sure.
Yeah.
Something's overcoming something else.
Yeah, this was near Colorado Springs, not too far from where NORAD is, Cheyenne Mountain. So if people remember, see, the kids aren't going to remember this, but the movie War Games, because I was just a kid.
Oh, yeah.
When War Games came out, you were probably...
old. Yeah.
No, you were probably
old.
A teenager.
Yeah.
You weren't old yet, right?
I'm older than Matthew Broderick.
You are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you were older than I was. But, I was still old enough to see the movie War Games. But anyways, people can go look at War Games or Cheyenne Mountain if you don't know what it is. But it's this essentially hollowed-out mountain where they have North American radar defense, which people should know about NORAD, because if you watched my video or you saw my lecture at MUFON, or if you saw some of our stories from John Greenwald and others, NORAD was essentially the group that was officially taking UFO reports for a period of time. So, and we'll be writing more about that. And in our next UFO magazine piece that we'll put on YouTube in a few weeks, we'll get more into that as well. But, an interesting story.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, I know we talked about it last week, but I'm glad you're doing this magazine online. It's really great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I look forward to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's always fun to highlight the research, the great research that's been done out there, but to kind of put it together in a consumable way so people can kind of understand the state of affairs. Because when you peel everything down, some people might get frustrated because we're not talking about abduction or any of these other wild and crazy things that supposedly happen and that some people believe is happening, and that's all they think about. Oh, I don't want to talk about UFOs. We know that the Zeta Reticular are here, and, I was talking to them last night. Despite all of that, if you look at what we know officially, if you look at the official record, which gets so muddled up and all of this other stuff, I think, that when you tell the official story, it's extremely compelling. And it demonstrates that the Air Force, there were plenty of Air Force personnel who felt that not only that was this a legitimate phenomena, that it could be extraterrestrial in nature.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
This was Air Force astronomers. They're the ones who started all this, not us goofballs like you and me out here doing it now.
I think what the issue is that they just got so far with it and then just realized it wasn't a threat and I'll move on type of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah, it must have something to do with it.
I think you're right. I mean, if we look at Chile, they have been investigating UFOs, a very transparent organization, their government organization, looking at UFOs. I talked about them also when I talked about government UFO cases at MUFON, but we've done a lot of interviews with them. You've done interviews with the Chilean group, CEFA, and that's kind of where they've gotten. They've looked at cases. They've admitted these cases are mysterious. They're so willing to go so far as to say we don't know what these are. There's many possibilities, including the possibility of extraterrestrials, and that however, they have not demonstrated a threat. They had a large meeting with many of their officials from many branches of the government where they literally sat down and analyzed the situation, and that was their outcome. They even did a press conference where they said, we decided in our committee that they do not demonstrate a threat. In fact, the biggest threat that they said it has to their pilots is when they see something strange like this and they're distracted by looking at the object or kind of freaked out by it. So I think you're right, and even for them, where can they go from here? And General Bermudez, who was at the UFO Congress, the guy in charge of CEFA, he said, in his speech at our conference, that he thinks the next step is really an international organization such as the UN needs to take the lead. I
sure hope that something happens with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool, huh?
That more countries join together and take it seriously. That would be great. And, as Leslie Kane has said a number of times, it wouldn't be that much money to appropriate for something like that. Just have a few people, scientists and people that will take, work on the subject, funded by our government. But I just don't see that happening, unfortunately.
And not to keep plugging this, but my MUFON Symposium talk, because that's what I talked about, was government agencies. And the great thing is now we have, through these other governments who have these agencies currently existing, we have different models for where those agencies can exist. Either in the Air Force, like some countries, I think like Argentina or Uruguay, or you could have it in the FAA, like Chile, or you can have it in the space agency, like the civilian space agency, like NASA, which is similar to what France does, or even, and actually, I believe it is Uruguay, the branch of the Air Force they have it in is like their Space Command. And some people may not realize we do have an Air Force Space Command, and the equivalent down there is where they have that organization. And what we'll get into on our next Open Minds magazine is that there have actually been organizations inside of these agencies in the United States that have investigated UFOs. Not necessarily NASA. There's no evidence of that. I have not seen anything compelling. There's some anecdotal information that is pretty wild, but not really strong, I feel. But there is on the record, and we'll get into this, there were secret, essentially, investigations in some of these groups. So it's just they were secret, not above board like these other countries. So exciting.
It is. Yes, sir.
Exciting world. This is kind of exciting, too, and I'm really glad to see the positive input. The last story I want to talk about, did you happen to see the video we posted on Friday of Cocoyoc, Mexico?
The strange-looking thing with all the things hanging off of it?
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I didn't see it. Yeah.
Very cute.
Yeah, what? Like another, someone has mentioned before, there's like jellyfish type looking things that people can't explain.
Yeah, so this was, what's cool about this too is that we're going into our archives. We have a photo archive. Most of it we got from Wendell Stevens, who is in the Air Force for decades investigating UFOs for many years. And, we're posting all this stuff. People have asked, what are you doing with the records? Well, we put it online. We have tons of it in our magazine, and we have tons of it on our website and our YouTube. And we're still taking these photographs and posting them online along with the information we have about them. So Michael Klein is doing that, our video guy. And these are some pictures from Cocoyoc, Mexico, taken on November 3rd, 1973. 4 people allegedly witnessed these. They were traveling to Mexico City when, a woman saw this at first. She pointed it out to her husband and everybody. At first, they thought it looked like a helicopter. They pulled over to look at it, and the gentleman took a couple pictures. He had a nice camera. Then he zoomed in with a telephoto lens. He switched his lenses and got some more pictures. But it's this weird round thing that is almost, hot air balloon shaped, kind of tear shaped like that, an inverted tear shape or something, but with these weird tentacles around the edge. And you would think maybe that's what it is, but there is no carriage under it. So it's really weird. That's for sure.
Now, the only thing you could think of if something for like a parade or something got away, but did it just float there? Are you aware of that?
I guess it floated. It came down and landed. They thought it went over a hill, and it seemed like it landed. They said there was a bridge on the other side of the object from them with some children on it, and they freaked out, and they took off.
Wow. So this thing was actually moving then?
Yeah.
Yeah, how about that?
So there is a special a guy who worked for Kodak in Mexico that analyzed it, and he said, this isn't any sort of manipulation of the film or anything as far as faking. So it was something that was out there. Maybe it was some sort of balloon. I don't know that was landing, but it's really weird. And others, I didn't realize, it's fun that we still have these pictures that aren't well known out there. But really, really weird case.
Yeah. Yep.
So check that out. What's fun with these videos too is we post them to Twitter, so they play on the Twitter feed. You push the play, there's Twitter does videos now, and we post them on Facebook as videos as well, and of course on our YouTube and on our webpage. So it's a lot of fun to have these multimedia pieces in our social media.
Right. Yeah, actually going back to 73 too is less things you have to worry about, like no CGI.
Exactly.
Or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's the same with all of these pictures we're posting like these in these small videos, is they do not have, this is prior to Photoshop and all of that. In fact, this one, I was in diapers when this sighting took place.
Okay. And you were there?
Just to add that,
no?
1973.
No.
No, I wasn't there, but in spirit maybe. I don't think I was there.
Yeah.
Who knows? I could have been aboard the craft cruising around, and these are memories I no longer
Yeah, you
have.
were abducted. Early abduction.
I was so tiny. I was only a few months old at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. You were old by then too, huh?
Yeah, I was a freshman in high school.
Were you really? Wow.
Wow. Stop doing the math.
Yeah. No math, people. Math is bad. Well, that's it for me. You got any other news there, Hungry Boy?
No, I think I'm pretty much expelled like a plume out of Europa.
Okay, great. That's a good way to wrap things up and bring things full circle.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Martin, for being on the show again.
Yes, you're very welcome, and I'll see you next week.
Yep, thanks. We'll talk to you next week, and let's go ahead and talk to the Zamora brothers. I am very excited to have to the show for the first time, surprisingly. This is one of those where it's like, someone I've known for, or some ones I've known for a while, and for some reason haven't gotten around to have you on the show, but I'm super excited to have you now. But I've got Tony Angiola and Ben Moss. How you guys doing?
Great, man.
Good to talk to you. So it was a lot of fun to see you guys yet again. Luckily, I get to see you fairly often, but at the MUFON Symposium recently, you guys did a great job with your talk.
Oh, thanks. You had the time to catch it because we were so busy. We missed almost all the others.
I know. I intended to try to get to most, if not all of them, and I got to very few. But luckily, I got to the majority of yours. I think I came in a little late for some reason, but luckily I got to see most of the whole thing. So it was a lot of fun. It was great to see, and I guess we should start off a little bit with because we'll be talking a lot about him, is Ray Stanford, your videos of him, because a lot of what we'll be talking about is the Socorro, New Mexico sighting, and he's done pretty much, hands down, I think you guys would probably agree, the best work on that.
Yeah, when we met Ray a couple years ago, he made sure to inform us that he did the most work on it.
And it's Stanford with a T.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he in the journal article we wrote, the Search for the Lost Socorro footage, he reached out to Jan when he heard we were looking for it, and Jan Harzan, the CEO of MUFON, put him in touch with us, and it turned out he lives like 45 miles from us.
Oh, cool. So you've probably got to get out there quite a bit.
Yeah, needless to say, we spent about over 200 hours with him. Numerous lunches. We got to learn about his favorite foods and and the treasure trove that he has in his house, which is full of not only dinosaur fossils and meteorites, but also tons of old UFO evidence from rocks that came from Socorro, to old photographs that many people have never even seen before, a library of books, a lot of them covered in dust because he's read them so long ago, they just, put them away. And on his third floor, he has his old magnetometer from the 1970s that he used with his PSI group when they did a lot of instrumented studies of UFOs, which you can also talk about that as well.
There were a lot of great talks at the symposium, ones that I liked a lot, but probably the highlight during a lecture might have been, for me, when you guys played the video of Ray being interviewed by Allen Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, a long time ago, closer to when the event happened. Because, well, for many reasons. First of all, Socorro is such an important case. Hynek is such an important person. And then to see this old footage that harkened back to that time, I kind of got goosebumps. I loved that.
Yeah, Ray, he had given us permission to show very small clips, and that's what we showed, I think 64 seconds altogether. But the pertinent piece was the confirmation of the film and the fact, Ray's the only living person that was actually on site, with NICAP, invited, cleared by Dr. Hynek. Nobody wanted him down on the site, but he's still got all his notes and everything. He's very meticulous in keeping all these things, and he gave us a copy of the Hynek interview, which is actually closer to an hour long, and shows Hynek at his site. There's a battle going on with supposedly the new instrumented study of UFOs, but Ray was doing this in the 70s, and he actually hit a UFO with a laser on the authority of the Air Force. So that's just the tip of the iceberg of all these stories we know about that Ray has been doing for the last 60, 50 years.
Not to mention he has a photograph depicting the laser that he hit. You can actually see it, how it's bending around the target. And there's a light reflection coming off that target that's reflected on the fence post from where he's shooting the object. And he points out that the moon is on the other side. So it can't be the moon, and there's no other external source of light, which is interesting.
Yeah, the Air Force and him had a good relationship. They told him to call. They usually knew when a UFO was near him, because when he called about this UFO, they go, oh, yeah, the black orb that's right over you right now. And Ray asked them if he could hit it with a laser, and they said, go ahead. And it just bends this laser right around it like it has some kind of field around it. And he actually was able to call and scramble a jet if he had an object that he was witnessing. So real interesting guy.
He hasn't shared this, right? You guys have seen it, but it's not like public.
He's talked about it, and we're allowed to talk about it. The actual photograph, I think he's willing to share that.
You have to be cleared to visit his house. He's invited a lot of people that haven't come out. I'm not going to harp on that, but he just doesn't want the info released in a way that he's not able to discuss it, and that's why we were never able to bring, because we don't have a copy of the photo. But these are things he's willing to share if you come visit him at his house, like James Fox has done and Chris O'Brien has done, and several Goddard scientists have done. So, there's just a treasure trove over there. And he's getting old. He's not in the best of health, but he's still, he'll talk for 14 hours and we'll be worn out, and he's still going strong. So
yeah. I'll get out there one day. He's invited me. He won't even do an interview without me getting out there first.
It's worth it.
I'm sure it is. I know it will be. I know it'll be one of those moments that I know I will have no regrets. But with everything else going on, I definitely on my list, my to-do list. But I do want to talk about a couple more questions real quick, actually, regarding this. Who in the Air Force, was this during the Blue Book times that he would have this sort of access, or even afterwards?
It was right after Blue Book, but it was the early 70s, I believe.
Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head the name of the person, the commander that he was speaking to. We just know that he had clearance, a direct line to the base, and he could scramble a fighter.
And he probably has recordings of this, but he was well known. They used to send reports to him He had a very sophisticated.
somewhere.
When they came over, they actually came over to see his PSI out in was it Texas?
Mm-hmm.
He had a laser attached to a high-end camera, and they said, "Man, your computer equipment is better than ours," because he had gotten like $2 million in grant money to fund this whole thing. So he had state-of-the-art equipment to and he's got this on magnetic tapes. When he hit the laser, it was sending information and getting information, so it's just very interesting stuff.
Alejandro, I'll tell you what, he's the only person I've ever met that can say he's been doing this full time since the age of 15.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know many people that can say that all their necessities have been covered, and all the money that they've collected, they've truly spent on research and investigating this subject.
And Phil Klass was out to his house many, many years ago and actually told Ray, he says, you're on something here, but you're onto something, but I'll never tell anybody.
As a matter of fact, there was a story that he told us that Phil Klass tried to get him on a boat all by himself, and Ray wouldn't go because he felt it was a little bit unusual. Why do we need to go out in the Potomac on a boat, just you and me?
So for people who don't know, Phil Klass was a famous debunker, and so we don't have any evidence of him ever trying to attempt to murder someone, but Ray, I guess, was probably afraid for his life.
I'm sure. For many times, he's got many stories of some kind of attempts on his life in the past, which were interesting.
Well, I want to get into Socorro some more, but before that, I want to get into you two and more about you all. So maybe we could start with Ben. What got you into this topic, and when did you start your investigations?
I was into it as a kid because I'm a big comic book collector, and I'd go and see these UFO magazines and grab them, and then when I was probably, I think, 8, I saw the Walter Cronkite special with my dad about UFOs, because they used to talk about it a lot more on mainstream media. Of course, there were only 3 channels then. But then I started investigating with MUFON in the early 90s, and then became chief investigator, and it's just always fascinated me. And back in the day, way before the internet or anything, the only thing I could hear about was when I'd go to the comic book store and grab all the magazines and look at all the neat pictures from all over the world that they had. I can't remember the name of the magazine. I'm sure it's long defunct, but just was, as a kid, a fan of Star Trek. It just fascinated me, and I've been hooked ever since.
Mm-hmm. And what was is, I come to think that you're retired, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, not that career? Old yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm in the internet space. I sell high-speed fiber and cloud-based services like voice over IP, and so I've been working in internet since the early 90s.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then you went on and you were on the Hangar 1 television show.
Yeah, we actually were on season 2. We hear that season 3 is in limbo, but while we were in Orlando, we got contacted by Discovery Channel, and they met us there, and we filmed some episodes for NASA's Unexplained Files, and then they liked what they saw, and they're going to invite us back to, I think, Texas to get on, talk some more, because I asked them why they didn't have any real researchers on the show, and I guess maybe they responded to that.
Mm-hmm. So, Tony, I guess that I know you have a technical background, an internet background as well. What got you into this topic?
Yeah, my story that I normally tell people is I started researching with MUFON in the 90s, but I need to amend that because I recently found some old drawings that I did when I was 5 years old, and about the age of 8, I wrote a story that included some UFOs. So I thought, so I knew about UFOs when I was a little bit younger, but no, I've been with MUFON since the 90s investigating, and I met Ben about 4 or 5 years ago at a networking event, which because when family happens and life takes over, you kind of put certain things on the back burner, and that's kind of what happened with UFO investigations in the between the 90s and around 2005. Then meeting Ben, we got reignited, and we just kind of went crazy with it, and we started doing a lot of investigations together and just kind of helping MUFON Virginia get back on track with cases and everything else. And then we went to the symposium in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is where we met Paul Villadolid and next thing you know, we tried out for Hangar 1, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. And so was that an IT networking event?
Yeah, it was, because I do network administration and IT security, and that's where I met Ben, and I had a client that needed his services, and so we kind of hit it off that way, and somehow I always end up talking about UFOs, or Ben talks about UFOs, and it just I remember Ben's expression. He said to me, just like, took a step back after I said something, and he says, "Well, I'm the chief field investigator of Virginia," and I said, "No, absolutely, I did not."
Wow.
So we started talking about that for a little while, and
Yeah, the Cherry Hill thing was the 2014 symposium.
Uh-huh. Cool. That's funny because, I know how it is, and I worked in the tech field also, and in particular, there was a data center I worked at, and I just got the job, and I don't like bringing the whole UFO things into it, especially because I was managing people and stuff, so I was sticking away from it, but then they found out. It's kind of a funny story, and it's, it's kind of weird when that happens, and then finally, sometimes people know each other for years before they find out that they have this mutual interest.
One recent story that comes to mind, since you mentioned that, and because I try to do the opposite, I try to mention UFOs rather than not.
That's cool. That's brave.
But I was off the coast of St. Martin scuba diving a few months ago, and I just, I just somehow get on the subject of talking about, either Hangar 1 or UFOs or MUFON and whatnot, and this guy on the boat says, "Wait a minute, you're into UFOs?" I says, "Yeah." He goes, "Does the name Ramey ring a bell?" I said, "Yeah, Roger Ramey, Roswell." He goes, "My name is Seth Ramey. That was my grandfather."
Wow.
And I said, "No kidding." And he goes, "Yeah." He started telling me various stories, and he said, "There's some things he can't tell me right now, and he has to, find out what he's allowed to tell me, because his grandfather told him a lot of interesting stories, and I'm trying to write an article for the MUFON Journal, and I'm still waiting for him to get back with me on some of these stories." But one thing he did mention was, when he was a toddler, his father met with Fidel Castro, and he was, I guess, babysitting him or what have you, but at some point he ended up on Fidel Castro's knee. And
wow.
There was a photograph taken, apparently, and I'm trying to get that photograph to put it in the journal with my article.
How cool. And for people who aren't up to speed, Roger Ramey was the guy who was in charge, who, when he put out the press release that debunked, essentially, the Roswell event when it happened, and said it was a weather balloon, which it wasn't, and the Air Force admitted years later it wasn't a weather balloon, and so he pretty much started the cover-up when it came to Roswell.
Ramey empties Roswell saucer. I remember that article.
Yeah, exactly. So cool, really cool. So let's get into then Socorro, because you guys are really focused on this lately, and that's what you talked about at the symposium. And maybe in a nutshell, as much as you can, if you can kind of give a highlight of, for people who may not know what that event was, what it was.
Real quick about that. Lonnie Zamora was a police officer in Socorro, New Mexico. He was basically on random patrol one day, April 24th, 1964, around 5:35, 45, when he saw a speeder go by, and he starts chasing the speeder, and in doing so, he sees this ellipsoidal object with a blue flame coming across the road. So he abandons the speeder, he turns his car off the road to pursue this object, which he at first thinks it might be a plane coming down or something like this. At about 150 feet, his car gets stuck, and he pauses for a moment. He looks out his window, and he sees what appears to be like an overturned vehicle, maybe an overturned car. He's really not quite sure, but he sees two figures in white coveralls. And again, he's about 150 feet away, and he puts his car back in drive. He keeps struggling to get his car closer. And when he finally reaches about a 50-foot distance from this object, and he proceeds to get out of his car, he no longer sees the figures, but he hears like two doors slamming, kind of like in a tank. And then he approaches this object. Then suddenly this blue flame comes underneath it, a loud roar. He thinks it's going to explode. And incidentally, he also thought that maybe the loud roar previously might have been the dynamite shack, exploding, because there is a dynamite shack out there, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But anyways, this object begins to lift off the ground to about 20 feet. Then Lonnie hits the ground prone with his head turned to the right, as he learned in the military, again, thinking this thing was going to explode. When it doesn't explode, he realizes that the sound has been completely silent, kind of like a high-pitched frequency. Then it goes completely silent, traveling towards the the perlite mill against a 40-mile-an-hour wind. And it was very steady, went against the wind for some distance, increasing in speed, and then eventually starts taking off at supersonic speeds at a 45-degree angle or even sharper until it was gone.
Mm-hmm. So this case is a really big deal because the military, Blue Book, all came to investigate, and they couldn't come up with an answer. And I think what's most important about this, and one of the things of many, and I'm sure you guys will have a much longer list than I would have, is that the head of Blue Book, the last head of Blue Book, Hector Quintanilla, who was a skeptic and didn't really believe in any case, he felt this was a genuine mystery, and this was the one case that he felt was a genuine, possible unknown, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, he was determined. It was the case that kind of, it's the one that pushed Hynek over the edge to form CUFOS with others, but Hector really, really thought he was going to find an explanation, and so he got top secret clearance. He said, this thing is in a hangar out at White Sands or one of these bases near here. So he was granted top secret clearance. We have all the Blue Book documents verifying this. He went to every hangar. He went everywhere, and the whole point of our presentation was to show that they could never find any company that made the vehicle, that had anything flying in the area, that had anything close to that tech. And then he had written a private memo to the FBI, who wanted to keep quiet that they were interested, that basically was released by a Freedom of Information Act in 1985, saying, look, I'm really confused. I never found an explanation. I believe that Lonnie saw what he said he saw, but I never found anything that man-made that tied into what that vehicle was.
Mm-hmm. And if the technology it exhibited and that he described, which I don't believe anybody felt he was lying, anybody who looked into this thoroughly, still doesn't seem to be something that exists to this day.
Yeah, that's why we showed. I don't know if you saw our video of the exploding 2010.
Yeah, that was great.
Because that was supposed to land on comets and things. The whole point was that the whole hoax scenarios is easily dismissed because we've been on site, and Lieutenant Holder, with the clip we showed, they scoured the site for evidence of fraud. There were no footprints or anything. And even years later, he said, "Look, I believe Lonnie saw what he said he saw. I have no idea what it was." Hector had no idea. The White House was telling them, look, let's call it a hoax. Menzel was saying, can we call it a hoax? And Hynek was going, a hoax doesn't radiate film, put 4 holes in the ground, and burn a creosote bush in half. And there were other witnesses. Sergeant Chavez probably saw the vehicle leaving, and we found that the officers had seen this object before and after. There was actually another landing, but they would never, ever talk about it, only among themselves, because they saw the way that Lonnie was treated, and they hated the Air Force, they hated Blue Book. They liked Ray, except Chavez, who didn't want anybody to bother Lonnie anymore. But this was not a one-off. This occurred multiple times, and then there was a pilot that we found out that had seen this in the air and saw the same symbol, the inverted V with 3 bars through it.
Mm-hmm. Also, let's not forget, this ruined Lonnie's life because he ended up quitting his job in the police force and just managing a gas station.
Really?
Everybody wished it had never happened. They all said, man, I'll never talk about it again. That's why these other officers, there was a landing near the canal in Socorro, and apparently these things were flying around a lot in this time frame, but they would never, ever talk about it because they didn't want to go through what Lonnie went through. And Lonnie actually stopped talking about the 2 figures he had seen because the Air Force told him to, and the whole thing with the obscuring of the symbol. They clamped down on him pretty hard. His wife, you could tell, was really upset with the whole thing, and it's a shame that he didn't. He died in 2009, not knowing that all the new information that's out there that proves this is a real case.
Plus, you can hear it in his voice. That recording that we played in our presentation, where Walter Schroed from KSRC asks him about the symbol, and you can hear the trembling in Lonnie's voice. He says, "I can't talk about that. They told me not to talk about that." However, Walter Schroed and everyone else in town already knew what the real symbol was because Lonnie reported it in Spanish back to dispatch. The moment he saw it, he was only 35 feet away from the object with a clear view of the symbol. And he reported it on the radio as soon as he could, and he made a drawing of it on a napkin right away. And you'll see Hynek recreated it, Project Blue Book recreated it in many of the documents, and just everyone mentioned, inverted V with 3 lines through it.
So, yeah, let's get into that. First of all, this was 1960, was it 64?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Socorro, Mexico. It was in the summer, correct?
No, April 24th.
Okay, April 24th. So, yeah, one of the things he saw on this craft was a sign, a symbol. And the symbol that got out there, which is kind of funny because for years, if not decades, people had, speculated around the symbol and what it meant, and all of these legends and mythologies had popped up around this symbol. But it's only recently, I believe, that Ray came out and said, actually, that was not the real symbol.
We helped them, like some of our friends that I can't remember the name, Frank Warren, at his site, we corrected the symbol there. The thing is, there are a lot of anti-Ray people out there that said he made up the symbol, but before Ray ever got on site, 4 different newspapers, including Albuquerque newspaper, had reported the inverted V with the 3 bars, and we have those newspaper copies. Also, in the Blue Book files, they clearly draw an inverted V with 3 bars. Hynek drew an inverted V with 3 bars in the National Archives when Ray and James Fox went there to pull the original letter. So the inverted V was 3 bars. Walter Schrode knew that 2 days after the incident. He asked Hynek, can he talk about it? Hynek talked about it. And while he was talking to the press, Lonnie was getting grilled by the FBI, and then the next interview, which was probably 10 minutes later, he asked the same question to Lonnie, and Lonnie goes, no, I can't talk about it. So they hadn't clamped down on Hynek. He talked about it, and then Lonnie said, I can't talk about it. And so they made up the fake symbol so that if anybody else reported this same UFO and gave the symbol they made up, they would know that they were not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm. And I felt when I heard about it, I was a little skeptical because, we've heard about this other symbol for years. But when I read Ray's story, his evidence was undeniable. I thought he did a great job of demonstrating via all of these files and everything you guys are talking about that, indeed, that was not the real symbol that we, the symbol we had come to know was not the real one. And I even forget, what did the old one, the original one, look like? I think an inverted U?
Yeah, it had like an arch, and it had like an arrow.
An arrow and an arch and another squiggly underneath it.
Mm-hmm. And you guys have probably seen some of the interesting ideas people have built up around that symbol.
Oh, everybody. It's interesting. As important and not important as the symbol is, in my opinion, it just shows just how much the Air Force will go to either cover something up or obfuscate something. To me, the most important elements of this case is the physical evidence, from which we can talk about the broken rock that had scrapings from the landing pads to the indentions, and the creosote bush or the greasewood bush that was sliced in half, at great temperatures. There's just so much to this case, from incredible witnesses that are police officers to physical evidence that, to me the symbol is just a distraction, really. But, it's more about what the Air Force, it tends to do in cases like this.
It shows how they muddled the waters by creating that other symbol, because the one that most people point to and say, no, the symbol was the one drawn on this corner of a newspaper. But if you have handwriting analysis have looked at that, Lonnie signed the piece of paper, but don't think he drew the symbol or anything else on there. When he originally said it in Spanish, en el video, I can't remember the statement. Ray knows it by heart, but he described in Spanish inverted V with 3 bars through it. That could have meant anything, from "Don't stand here, danger, radiation, thruster," or it could be their national symbol, or
it could be anything. We'd have no idea what the symbol could mean.
Mm-hmm. Now, the entities, or these two, odd people, or whatever they were, near the craft, how did he describe what they were wearing, and have you heard of any other examples?
Lonnie described it as two things in white coveralls. He was very clear about that. We played the recording also that he recorded with Walter Schrode, shortly after the event. And he's very careful about how he described things. He wanted to make sure that people didn't, quote him as saying that they were children or people. He just says that they were these, two figures in white coveralls. He wasn't sure what they were, but he didn't want to say that, what he, in his opinion, what it could possibly be.
And they were standing next to a 5-foot bush and were not as tall as the bush.
Wow. So they were little.
Little people,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And it does seem a bit, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think they're a lot of the most credible cases. The descriptions of the entities involved are unique, not so much similar to other sightings, and that kind of seems to be the case in this sighting.
Yeah, you also mentioned if other people reported something similar, and there have been reports from all over the world, France, Italy, Germany, on the over in Europe, and then also in the United States, there were other sightings and multiple reports of the same thing that just either didn't get reported around the same time or just didn't get a whole lot of attention for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple of there's two in particular hoax theories that are out there that, and to be honest, I mean I've never felt that they described the situation very closely if you look at all the evidence. But one of them being that, and this is a more recent one, that there was burnt cardboard found near the site, and that it was some local college students who essentially were getting back at Lonnie for harassing them, essentially, and that they had built a cardboard UFO that they blew up or something like that.
Yeah, we touched briefly on the gentleman. What was the guy's name again?
Was that Bragalia?
No, Bragalia harped on it, but it was I can't remember the guy's name. But what he said in a letter was that it was probably college students that wanted to get back at Lonnie, and that started the whole thing. He had no proof. When we were in Socorro, we asked to see, because we had gotten permission to be on the landing site. We asked to see the two guys that said they hoaxed it. Neither one of them would talk to us. One had fled town. One was in the hospital. But if you go to the site, I mean, you have over 11 witnesses visually and through auditory. There would have to be a lot of people in on this. First of all, there was a front coming in, so no balloon or any device made by college students could go off into a 40-mile-an-hour wind. Plus, there were no footprints there. There was no pyrotechnics. Lieutenant Holder was very clear that they searched the area for a hoax. Chavez actually looked in Lonnie's car to see if he could find any kerosene or anything, which is a little unknown story. But there was nowhere to hide. There was no way to actually create this scenario where other people heard the roar, where several other police officers saw it. This whole thing was just a supposition by this gentleman that said, well, it was probably college students. But if you've been on site, and we did show a video, there's nowhere to hide, and there's no way to coordinate this whole thing because other witnesses saw the craft coming towards Socorro, and the two guys in the car saw the craft leaving Socorro.
Oh, you're talking about Keys and Kratzer.
Keys and Kratzer, yeah.
But also, to address what you said, Alejandro, about the burnt cardboard and paper, Ray collected this burnt evidence with Dr. Hynek at the time. They also had it analyzed, and there was nothing exotic about the burnt material. Plus, even when we were on site, we noticed it's kind of a party site where young people tend to break bottles and have campfires and burn stuff like this. And it's very possible that that's more likely what it was. If you look at the original black and white videos that we shot,
there's nothing there.
It was. The current stuff shows that there's nothing there, but you can see there's a lot of debris.
The tourists trampled it, but it's in the depression where a lot of things end up there just because the wind brings them through there. But at the time there was old paper, but there was no cardboard or there was a piece of paper that had a strange burn on it as if from above. But, once again, Lieutenant Holder went through and said we found no evidence of kerosene or gasoline or any type of propellant. We found no pyrotechnics. We found no footprints. There had to be a ton of footprints if somebody was actually working a hoax on this.
That's right.
So there's absolutely zero evidence for a hoax. Plus, the two guys that said they did it probably just to become famous won't talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've been to the area. I've been to the memorial. That's kind of on the side of the wash that I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. Is that very close to the spot?
It's about maybe...
a mile, I think.
I don't know if it's a mile, but maybe close to it. But even when we were there, we noticed that we had to clear the tumbleweeds out of the way just to see it because it's not very well, it's not kept up very well.
Yeah, it's not advertised. It's, the whole theory about them trying to bring tourists there. I mean, the mayor didn't own the property. There was nothing built to they don't advertise. They don't have the, Socorro
Day or anything.
Yeah, Socorro Day. So,
and I think that was Class's... The other hoax theory that I wanted to bring up, which I think Class said they were just it was just a publicity stunt orchestrated by the mayor's office or something like that, which also, like you said, seems ridiculous because it didn't work at all. It could have if they wanted to, but they could have started having a festival and all of this stuff.
Even Kelly Hopkinsville has a festival every year.
Right, and that's what they would have done.
Yeah, they never did anything. They never tried to promote it. They never got, it made people's lives miserable, which is just the opposite effect you would want to do with a hoax.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the funny thing is it's, I go to Roswell pretty much every year and have for quite a few years. And luckily I don't have to drive anymore or else I wouldn't do it because it's such a long drive. But I get to go by the, the satellite, the large satellite array and through Socorro and then White Sand. So I always stop off at all of these places for years. But you're right. I mean, it's like kind of in this shady area, the monument, and it's off the street. There's no signs to it.
No.
I had to follow, directions online, and essentially it was only a few blocks from our hotel, but you wouldn't know it. And the whole time you're going there, you're like, this can't be right. This can't be right. This can't be right. And all of a sudden, on the side of the road, near some, kind of an unkept area altogether, you see this, what is a very pretty picture and very nice. I tweeted it and I vined it, and I think it's on my Facebook. People can see it. But you guys have it out there too.
Yeah, it almost looks like what you normally see, like a water, sewage, cement drainage site, if you will. Because it's kind of like a wall of cement. And when I first saw it, I almost was kind of looking for a tunnel, like a rainwater tunnel under it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was covered with tumbleweeds. We had to clear it out just to get a picture. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when we contacted the El Defensor chieftain editor to get permission to be on the site, he had a hard time finding the site.
Yeah. I don't know, did you actually make it to the site, Alejandro, where the...
No, because I wasn't sure where the site was, so I made it to that monument. But
we weren't sure either.
Yeah, you got to watch out for rattlers. And what's interesting that you touched on, when we flew into Socorro to drive down to your great event in Scottsdale.
Thank you.
In February, you passed through Detal and Magdalena, where all kinds of UFO incidents have happened, including supposed crashes. And when we stopped to get gas or pick up beer, we weren't drinking in the car, but
no, we weren't drinking at all.
Everybody was, so do you ever see anything unusual out here? And everybody said, man, we get tired of talking about it. This stuff flying around all the time, and there's such a rich UFO history going down 60 West towards Scottsdale from Socorro. It's just a lot of things have happened around there.
Yeah, a lot, and it's just a very mysterious area. White Sands is just incredible. I mean, I love that area too. It just feels different. But so
we actually photographed something when we were going.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, it seemed Ben was driving, and I noticed something out the window, and I rolled the window down because I always, talking to Mark D'Antonio, first question he asks you is, were you shooting through a window? So we always make sure we bring that window down, and we were shooting with a Nikon 35 millimeter with a 50 millimeter focal length, shooting in RAW format to capture as many pixels as possible. And it's this bright object going through the clouds, and we snapped about 7 photographs of it, and it seemed to be displaying some sort of plasma aura. and as it changed shape and direction, it was really interesting.
It was white with a red dome or light on top. It had, the signs of what usually we feel like is a real anomaly. It has purple and green plasma discharges around it, and was moving fairly quick. It was pretty far away, but we captured, I think, 10 pictures of it. And I know Robert Powell, the science guy at MUFON, looked at it and said, man, that's pretty interesting. We just haven't gotten into great detail on that because we're so busy with a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. Do you have those pictures up anywhere?
No, we should probably put them on our MUFON site.
Yeah, we've been holding off because we wanted to get more opinions, but we might put it up on our website. If you go to www.mufonva sometime by next week, I'll try to get them up there. So I'll go out of town tomorrow.
Because we'd rather have people have at it, and do their own analysis. Because the good thing about us looking for our own evidence is if we took it, we don't have to figure out if it was a hoax or not. Because with all reports, we got to first figure out, all right, is this a misidentification, a natural event, or are they lying to us? Mm-hmm. So if we catch our own photos, we can start knowing that we photographed this, and we got to see what it is and make sure we're not misidentifying something.
Wow. So was this either of yours first sighting?
I don't know. It's hard to say because we photograph a lot of stuff that we're really not sure about.
Gotcha.
So, in some ways, maybe yes, but in some ways, maybe no.
I've had 3 things that I've seen. I had, when I was in Key West years and years ago, I saw what looked like a shooting star, but it stopped. Another shooting star. The shooting star, if you blink, you miss it. How fast they move. But when this thing came, the other one caught up to it, and then they took a right-angle turn.
Wow.
First real sighting.
Shooting stars always do that.
Yeah. My second sighting was in college, and I think this was military, but we were at a keg party, and some type of whistling sound was starting to get louder and louder, and I looked up, and 100 of us saw this, and there was a missile with all kinds of flaps and fins on it that was losing altitude.
Holy crap.
I think it was a cruise missile prototype, because this is way back. I'm not going to tell you. But it started with afterburners and increased speed and flew. This is in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And the third thing I saw was during a thunderstorm. I still don't know if it was, ball lightning, which is really unusual. But I saw 2 tracks come out of one cloud, go into another cloud that were purple. Then 2 balls followed the tracks from one cloud to another cloud with a whooshing sound.
Huh.
And my roommate and I both saw it. Purple, it's just really weird. But if you've ever seen ball lightning, it could have been that, but I'm not sure because of the tracks that showed up in front of it.
Mm-hmm. But, see, and that's what's great. I think that, the way you all look at stuff and analyze things, and like you said, Tony, because I feel the same way, they could have been, but who knows? It just shows that you're researching and you're not. Whereas we all 3 know that there are people who will see something like that, or often they are something mundane, but they create in their mind this whole idea about.
Well, sure, they create a whole backstory behind it.
And, it's the aliens, it's the hybrids.
Yeah.
So we don't ever like to say, until one of these things land and gets out and says, by the way, I'm from Orc. I'm not going to sit there and speculate that they are.
Yeah. I mean, it could be anything. We don't even know if...
even if they told me that, I'd say, prove it.
We don't know if Socorro was an ET event, but we don't think it was a human event, but,
We don't know what it was.
The universe is pretty strange.
Well, getting back to the Socorro and the Mork from Oric, funny enough, is that that's what's weird about this case too. Is it's so credible. However, the object is egg-shaped almost, and it had these landing pads with little pads on the bottom that seem, not completely foreign to our sort of technology. At least, the legs of the lunar lander, for instance, were similar, although it certainly couldn't do all those things that this thing can do. What have you guys thought about that, or what does Ray think about that?
Well, one thing Ray mentioned about a year ago when we were with him on podcast UFO with Martin Willis was that Ray discovered that he had a photograph that he hadn't seen in a very long time, and the photograph that was, I guess, filed for Project Blue Book had these what appeared to be somewhat like bug-looking things that were in the photograph. They airbrushed them out. Then when Ray looked at the original photograph and used a magnifying glass, he could clearly see that what they airbrushed out was an egg-shaped craft or ellipsoidal object with 4 landing legs down, deployed, and then to the right of it, further in the distance, was another ellipsoidal object, and even further back by the mountains, past the Perlite Mill, were 2 even larger objects. So after he realized this, he had some scientists at Goddard take a look at the first object that was the closest to the camera, determined that it was about 0.6 miles away from the camera, measured the distance of these legs or landing pads, and matched them to what was on the ground at Socorro, and he concluded that it very much was the exact same object by calculating the minutes of arc and the distance between the pads to what landed on the ground, and that the other objects were more like 2 miles away in the distance. And there's actually even one other craft farther off in the photograph that was flat as a pancake, undeterminate size, but it looks very large.
Yeah, the whole thing about the struts and the fact that maybe a ladder had come out because there were indentations, we've had people ask us about that. One gentleman asked us at the symposium, but you just don't know how another culture or whatever this thing was developed. They had an exotic engine, just like we do. We have one engine to get us to the moon, another one that lands us and brings us back to a mothership, which is the lander goes up to the ship that got them there. The same thing here. Could have been a bigger ship to scourge these smaller objects, but if it's say it's a civilization, if they're 500 years ahead of us, they might have ladders and struts. If they're 10,000 years ahead of us, maybe not. But
I tend to joke about the ladder thing not being technologically advanced enough, but we tend to judge by our own human standards because that's all that we know.
Might not have been a ladder.
Right. It may not have been.
Well, and to your point, that video you showed of kind of a lander, I think they're making it to go to Mars, a recent test where it kind of it's supposed to lift up and kind of move around, but it kind of flopped over and exploded.
So it's like a central propellant.
Yeah, it's still propellant. It's not a knifing blue flame that created a very short half-life of radiation.
And it exploded in grand fashion. I mean, that the explosion was amazing because of the propellant, but it didn't look much different than the moon landers. So even we, because the leg system works, we haven't changed that look either. Right.
Yeah, there's so many things about that there's nothing like it today. Even today, that thing in 64 would still have some amazing properties to it. And I know that Don Berlinger did a study, and we're going to see him soon, at Mysteries of Sky and Space, but there's not a lot of radioactive materials that have a half-life of hours. And this thing fogged film the day of and the day after, there was no radiation detected. So you're talking about some type of really exotic non-propellant that knifed into the ground, didn't really blow a lot of dust around.
Perhaps some kind of subatomic particle discharge.
It's all speculation, but the way this thing operated, and then for it to cut off and travel silently away means it has 2 different modes of propulsion, one to land and one to really take off and maybe move into space.
Mm-hmm. So we didn't get. I did want to get into more of the physical evidence. However, we're kind of running out of time. So maybe we'll just save that for another time. It'd be great to have you guys back and talk about that and some other things.
It's a 3-hour presentation altogether.
Yeah, exactly. So, but before we are done, what I would like to talk about is kind of promote, what are you guys up to next? Where are you speaking next? Where can people see you next?
We're going to be at Mysteries of Sky and Space just as guests.
And we're also going to North Carolina.
Going to North Carolina to MUFON event.
With Nick Redfern will be there, Tom Reed, Travis Walton will be down there.
We will be on some upcoming episodes of NASA's Unexplained Files, which are really nice. It's a pretty well done show as opposed to other shows I won't mention.
Right, but, and I like the NASA show.
Yeah, and we've got jobs and all. I tell people, and it's getting old for me to say it, but if you get into UFOs and become rich and famous, you're going to be poor and unknown. We just want to find the truth.
I'm supposed to be at work right now.
Yeah, I start a new job a week from Monday, but it's tough to find the time because we have to do all the cases locally. We've had a lot of triangles in Virginia, but I'm pretty sure those are probably military.
Mention the Shenandoah Black UFOs.
Yeah, we found a gentleman. it's funny. We go shooting out at a guy's range in Shenandoah, and he mentioned that we met somebody out there who was a political figure. We can't mention, but he told us about a UFO that they saw in Korea during the Korean War. And then another gentleman said, "Oh yeah, my neighbor says these black objects. Every time it rains, these black objects are flying around in the mist between the mountains." I'm like, okay, we got to go out there and set that up because that's a good 2 hours away. But there's a lot happening in this area, definitely.
Yeah, well, and that's the issue, is that there really is so much going on. When I was doing with PR with MUFON, especially, people would ask, why doesn't MUFON do that? Why doesn't MUFON do this? They've got all these investigators, but these people have jobs, Right. They're busy themselves, and there's so much to look into that's why it gets hard for me to get to Ray's or here or there or elsewhere.
Well, not to mention you need to buy equipment too. It's like we still need we need magnetometers, we need better cameras, we need all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to syndicate a show, we have an idea for a show, but if we had the equipment, we could go to places where we could find these things and film them. There's so many hot spots. Four Corners area, definitely. Shenandoah, definitely. New Mexico is full of these. It's like our friend Jeremy Ray from Hangar 1 said, that they're out there all the time. And like Ray says, don't look for them at night where you don't get that much data. They're out there in the daytime, especially at dusk and dawn when the light is polarized.
That's a great plug. Definitely do it at dusk because of the polarized light. That's when we shot the UFO when we were driving through Magdalena that we're going to post up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get a much better image, and because of the setting sun, you don't get these artifacts because I'm sure you've seen every time somebody takes a picture facing the sun, they go, "I got a UFO," and you're like, "That's a lens flare, man."
Yeah. So MUFONVA .com is where they can go find more of your stuff and see these pictures here soon.
Yeah, and all our interviews, and we're just glad to talk about it. We hopefully are going to get some hard evidence and maybe help talk Ray into releasing more things. So there's a lot to come.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll definitely have you guys back. This has been a ton of fun. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to come talk to me.
I appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out. It's good to see you in Orlando.
Yeah, you too.
And we'll see you in February. We're planning on coming out to the UFO Congress.
Awesome. I always get so excited to hear when people say that. So that's very cool. All right. See you guys soon.
All right, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much to Tony and Ben for being on the show. This is an amazing case, as you can hear. I'm not sure. Some of you probably weren't familiar with the case, and some of you probably were, but still did not know all of this. Now, if you did all know all of this, who are you working for? How did you know? Just kidding. You probably heard these guys speak before, like if you saw them at MUFON. But yeah, what an amazing case. Really cool, interesting stuff. One of the best cases out there. And it's really cool that these guys are doing this research and working with Ray to get this information out because it's important to get out. So you can get, I know I was talking a lot about my MUFON lecture at the beginning of the show, but you can get both of our lectures at the MUFON site. So just MUFON.com, check that out. And so you can see more about what all of us were talking about. It was a lot of fun. And these guys were great. So we'll definitely have them on again because I had so many more questions, but I really wanted to get into all of those things we talked about. And there's so much to this case that, as you heard, there's a lot to talk about. And that just relates to other cases, and that's what's fun with these guys because they're actually researchers. So you can talk to them about how, that their work on the Lonnie Zamora case or the Socorro case, they call it, also, relates to other aspects of this field and other cases, other great cases. So speaking of great cases and conferences, I got to remind you guys that this weekend, October 1st, is the official deadline for the super early bird tickets for the UFO Congress. So if you want to get UFO Congress tickets at the cheapest that they're ever going to be, then you've got to go do that right now. Right now. Well, wait till the show's over and then do it, or put me on pause and go ahead and do it, because the tickets are drastically, they're greatly discounted. So you could get the tickets at the cheapest price if you order them now. So go get your tickets. Why get tickets? Come on. Do you have to ask? It's the Guinness World Record winning largest conference, but more than that, it's the speakers that we have. So you guys will recognize a lot of our speakers because you listen to my show. However, some of these speakers are people I haven't had on the show before, and some of them are going to be speaking about topics. There's some of your favorites that have been on my show, but they're going to be speaking about topics you haven't heard them speak about before. So here's some exciting examples. I've just posted today the talks from, or a couple of extra people. Ted Rowe, he works for NARCAP, and NARCAP researches aviation cases. So they call them UAPs. They like that word because, they feel that they work with professionals. I mean, they work with mainstream science, with actual pilots. And so they feel that the term UFO comes with too much baggage. We've probably talked about this before because, of course, many people on the show have talked about NARCAP and how important they are. But Ted Rowe is the executive director, and he will be speaking at our conference. And that is a great honor because they are very particular about where and who they speak with, essentially because, they want to maintain their credibility. So you'll have to check that out. Also, Colonel Charles Halt, who was one of the witnesses at the Rendlesham Forest, has a new book out. We're going to have two colonels. So we're also going to have Colonel John Alexander, and he's going to be talking about an incredible experience that he has had that is not only UFO, but it's also like New Agey and all of this wild and crazy stuff. So, which is really wild for him because a lot of people feel that he's very conservative and he poo-poos a lot of people's ideas in this field. And he is conservative about, what the Air Force may or may not know. However, he is coming out in this case to talk about some incredible stuff this way. So these are some of the new people we've listed. We've got Noe Torres, who's been on the show, talking about cowboys and aliens. You might remember these incredible cases that we talked about from the 1800s. But he'll be coming to the conference, and he'll be going over more of these because he goes over them more quickly and in more depth because he doesn't have me asking a bunch of silly questions. He's got it all laid out there. But those are some of the talks. We have most of the talks posted, so you can see almost all of the speakers. We always have those few little surprises for you guys, right? So we still have those, and so we don't have all of the speakers up. We've got surprises in store, but I think if you go look at the speakers who are listed so far, you'll see that you'll definitely want to be participating in this event. So get your tickets now because they're going to be the cheapest that they'll ever be. And then also reserve rooms in the host hotel because I think they still have a few left. And that's like discounted more than half price. It's typically a very expensive place, but it's only like $120 a night, $100 a night, something like that. $120, I think, during the conference because we've got this major discount. And you'll see why they're super expensive normally because this hotel, if you haven't been there, is gorgeous. I mean, it's grade A, class act, just a gorgeous place in the middle of the desert. And some of you may think, how can a desert be beautiful? Well, come out and see, and you will see how the desert can be breathtaking. It is beautiful there. And it's during, it's in February, where if you live in a lot of the country, you're going to be freezing your butt off, or if you live in like Canada or something, you're going to be freezing to death. So come out to Arizona and enjoy our great weather. Weather's perfect at that time of year. You can get in the hot tub, you can get in the pool. It's just awesome, and hang out with UFO people. So go check out ufocongress.com and you'll be able to see the speakers there. Lots of really cool stuff. And do, and I'm going to emphasize this one more time because people miss it. Get your tickets now. Super early bird ends this weekend. Get your tickets, people. That's about it for today. Thank you all who have gone and viewed our Open Minds magazine, the video that we created, episode, essentially issue 1 of the Open Minds video version of the magazine. You can find that at YouTube or at openminds.tv. So far, people have really loved it. We go in depth into the most incredible, I think, Blue Book case out there, where Blue Book investigators, Air Force UFO investigators, witnessed, a UFOs, jets chase UFOs, all this craziness. So go check out that video on YouTube or at openminds.tv. All of the stories that we talked about you can find at openminds.tv. And also remember, you can find Tony and Ben at MUFONVA.com. That's the Virginia MUFON. And I also want to thank Caleb Hanks, who does the opening and close music for us. I think I mentioned this last time, but his brother Micah Hanks, who writes UFO stories and other things for people, he wrote a great story for Jim Harold about these kind of mysterious satellites, and Jim let us, from Paranormal Podcast, let us repost one of those stories, so check that out at our site as well. But thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music. You can find more about him on our radio page at openminds.tv. And thank Martin Willis from Podcast UFO for doing the news with us earlier in the show. And finally, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Join us next week, where we'll be back for another show. So exciting stuff. I know you people were really upset with me for taking some vacation time. Tough. The beach was nice. The sun was beautiful. The waves. The